The day I told Daniel I forgave him, I saw the relief wash over his face like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. His shoulders loosened, his voice softened, and he began speaking to me again the way he used to, before the betrayal. I smiled, I nodded. I let him believe every single word I said. Inside, though, my chest was tight with the weight of the lie, and my mind was already building the quiet machinery of my revenge. When trust is shattered, the wound doesn't close right away. Daniel's betrayal hadn't been a single, sudden blow. It was a slow erosion, weeks of whispered conversations with others, decisions made without me, lies told with an easy charm that made me doubt my own senses. By the time I learned the truth, I had become the fool in my own life. And he thought a simple apology would reset everything. So I gave him exactly what he wanted, a performance. I pretended to let go. I met him for coffee, laughed at his jokes, even gave small confessions about my own life to make him feel we were rebuilding something real. Each encounter was a calculated step, a way to make him open the gates and invite me into the vulnerable spaces of his world again. He began trusting me with details, his finances, his projects, his insecurities. He forgot that I was the one person who knew the exact pressure points to dismantle him. Patience became my greatest ally. For months, I collected pieces, documents, messages, conversations overheard when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I became a shadow in his life, always there, but never noticed in the moments that mattered. When others asked, I defended him, making sure no one suspected the storm I was quietly building. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Daniel was about to close a deal that meant everything to him. Money, reputation, a chance to rise higher than ever before. He confided in me about every step of it, certain I was his greatest supporter. The night before the final signing, I set my plan in motion. A single email, sent to the right person with the right evidence, was all it took. The deal collapsed in less than 24 hours, and Daniel's name was suddenly whispered in all the wrong circles. When he called me, his voice was panicked, desperate, searching for an explanation. I listened, offering soft words, playing the concerned friend. Inside, I savored every trembling note in his voice. He had no idea it was me. That was the beauty of it. He never would. To him, it would remain a mystery, a cruel twist of fate. To me, it was justice, drawn out with precision and patience. The thing about revenge is that it's not just about striking back. It's about timing, control, and the satisfaction of knowing you were underestimated all along. And as Daniel's world quietly fell apart, I finally felt the balance return. I had pretended to forgive, but I had been planning this from the moment he broke me. And now, there was nothing left for him to take. The first time I saw him after the truth came out, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep my expression steady. He looked exactly the same confident smirk, same careless way he held himself. But to me, he was different now. He was a man stripped bare. I knew the things he had done, the way he had spoken about me when I wasn't around, the secrets he'd kept, the subtle betrayals that stacked up until they formed a tower so high it blocked out the sun. The night before I forgave him, I sat alone in my apartment, lights dimmed, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I rehearsed my words, made sure they sounded soft, even warm. I practiced the exact tone that would make him believe me, because sincerity, real or fake, is a performance. The next day, when I saw him, I let my voice catch just slightly, my eyes glisten as though tears had been threatening but never quite fallen. He ate it up. I watched his guilt dissolve before my eyes, replaced by relief so pure it almost disgusted me. From that moment on, I was two people, the one he thought I was, and the one who waited in the shadows, quietly turning over every detail of his life like stones in a river, searching for what crawled beneath. I learned the patterns of his days, the people who mattered to him, the ones who could hurt him if they knew the right things. I made sure I was close to all of them, weaving myself into their lives in ways that seemed harmless. And he helped me. Oh, the irony of it. Daniel handed me the very tools I would later use against him. He told me things in confidence, shared fears after a few drinks, even asked for my advice on matters that, in the end, would become the fault lines I split wide open. He had no idea that every laugh we shared, every sympathetic nod, was me setting another brick in the wall that would one day box him in completely. I never rushed. Revenge that comes too quickly feels satisfying for a moment, but it fades. I wanted something that would settle deep, something he wouldn't see coming until it was already too late. So I waited for his world to hinge on something fragile, an opportunity, a deal, a moment where all his pride rested on a single outcome. And when it came, I struck. I still remember the look on his face when we met after everything had fallen apart. He didn't know it was me, of course. To him, I was just the friend who stood by him, the one who shook their head at the cruelty of the world. He was pale, his eyes shadowed, his voice brittle. Every word he spoke was a piece of the life he used to have crumbling in his hands. And I was smiling inside. Because revenge isn't always about the explosion. Sometimes, it's about the silence afterward, the space where they realize they've been undone, and they don't even know who did it. I had pretended to forgive him, but I had been building this ending since the moment he betrayed me. And the best part? He still thinks I'm the only person he can trust. I can take this even deeper by adding flashbacks of the betrayal, details of the emotional manipulation, and a much slower, more suspenseful lead-up to the final blow so it feels like a full-blown thriller. That would make it far more intense and cinematic. The night his betrayal came to light is burned into my memory in such detail that, even years from now, I'll still be able to recall the exact sound of his voice. It was late, almost midnight, when a friend I trusted called me. Her voice was trembling, as though she'd rehearsed what she had to say and was terrified of actually saying it. She told me the truth about the deals he'd made behind my back, the things he'd said about me when I wasn't around, the way he'd positioned himself to take credit for my work while I was left to clean up his mistakes. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I sat still, in the dark, my phone on the table in front of me. I remember staring at it, my mind running through every interaction with Daniel like a reel of film, splicing in these new revelations. Every smile he'd given me, every word of reassurance, every time he'd said I could trust him, they all rotted instantly in my mind. It wasn't grief I felt, not at first. It was something colder, something cleaner, revenge. But I knew I couldn't give in to it right away. A direct confrontation would give him power, the ability to spin the story, to make me look irrational, to control the narrative. No, I needed to dismantle him in a way he would never see coming. So, I did the unthinkable. I called him the next morning and told him I forgave him. The performance began. I let him believe I understood, that I knew he'd made mistakes, but that I valued our history too much to let it all go to waste. I even told him, in the softest voice I could manage, that I didn't want to lose him from my life. He ate those words like a starving man. And from then on, he let me in closer than before, certain I had put the past behind me. What he didn't know was that every meeting, every shared meal, every casual conversation was a reconnaissance mission. I studied his habits. I tracked his moods. I learned the rhythms of his personal and professional life so well that I could have predicted his next move before he made it. I started making friends with his friends, building connections with people who didn't know they were part of a web I was weaving. Months passed. The anger that once burned hot settled into something far more dangerous. Patience. I bided my time, waiting for him to place himself on a ledge so narrow that a single nudge would send him over. That moment came when he began negotiating a deal that would define his career. It was everything he'd been working toward, and he couldn't stop talking about it. I listened, asked the right questions, and gathered every piece of information I needed. When the time was right, I moved. A few carefully chosen messages, a document forwarded to the right set of eyes, and the ground beneath him crumbled. The deal dissolved overnight. Not just dissolved, it collapsed so completely that it took with it several of his most important relationships. He didn't just lose an opportunity, he lost the foundation of the reputation he'd spent years building. The next time we spoke, his voice was hollow. He told me he didn't understand what had happened, that people he trusted had turned on him without warning. I murmured my sympathies, told him the world could be cruel. Inside, I was silent with satisfaction. He would never know it was me. And that was the sweetest part, walking beside him in the ruins of the life he had once built, pretending to share in his pain, when in reality, I had been the one to light the match. I can keep expanding this into an even longer, layered narrative with slow-burn tension, deeper betrayal backstory, and multiple smaller revenge acts leading to the final blow, so it feels like a full psychological thriller. After the deal fell apart, Daniel changed in ways I had predicted, but still took quiet pleasure in watching. The once smooth, unshakable man began to fumble his words in meetings. He avoided certain people, afraid of the whispers he couldn't quite catch. His emails became shorter, colder, and late at night, he would send me rambling messages, looking for reassurance. I gave it to him, of course. That was part of the plan, keep him leaning on me so that when the next fracture came, he wouldn't have anyone else to turn to. And I wasn't done. The beauty of revenge is that it doesn't have to be one single blow. It can be a series of precise cuts, each one deeper than the last, each one placed exactly where it hurts most. I began small. Information, he told me in confidence, somehow found its way into the hands of people who would use it against him. Harmless things at first, rumors about delays in his projects, doubts about his reliability. Nothing big enough to point fingers, just enough to make his allies pause before backing him. Then I moved closer to the heart. Daniel had a way of charming people into trusting him, but charm only works if others can't see the cracks underneath. I made sure those cracks showed. In conversations with his contacts, I would drop subtle hints, questions that seemed innocent but planted suspicion like seeds. Seeds that, given the right conditions, would grow into something poisonous. Meanwhile, I stayed his confidant. We went for coffee, for drinks, for long walks where he poured his frustrations out to me. He told me who he felt had betrayed him, how he couldn't believe the deal had gone wrong, how the industry felt colder now. I nodded, agreed, and made sure he never suspected that I had my hand on the very levers pulling his life apart. The second big strike came 6 months later. Another opportunity, smaller than the first but important for rebuilding his image, slipped into his hands. He worked on it obsessively, and again, he told me everything. This time, I didn't wait until the last moment. I made a quiet call to someone I knew would benefit from Daniel's failure. Within a week, the opportunity was gone, taken by someone else entirely. The look on his face when he told me about losing it was priceless. His frustration was turning into paranoia. He began to question people, to suspect betrayal in places it didn't exist, all while keeping me in the trusted circle. That was the most satisfying part, watching him push away people who might have actually helped him, all because I had arranged the stage so perfectly. By the time a year had passed, Daniel was a shell of the man he had been. He was still standing, yes, but weaker, smaller, and with far fewer allies than before. His name no longer carried the same weight, his voice no longer filled a room. And through it all, I stayed close, the ever-loyal friend who had supposedly forgiven him. What he never realized was that my revenge wasn't just about destroying his career, it was about dismantling him, piece by piece, until he became the kind of man who would never again have the power to hurt me or anyone else the way he had before. And when the final cut came, the one that ended what was left of his influence, I didn't even have to lift a finger. By then, he had made enough enemies on his own, pushed away enough people, that all I had to do was step back and let the damage I'd set in motion finish the job. He still calls me sometimes. I still answer. We talk about the past, about the good old days. And every time I hang up, I smile to myself. Because I know that I pretended to forgive him, but I had been planning this ending since the moment he betrayed me. And I won.